I hesitated for just a second before picking up the phone, already bracing myself for another unpleasant exchange. Paul often called me at the worst possible times, but this time was different. The lines of worry etched across my face deepened as I answered. "What is it now, Paul? I hate to break it to you, but my girlfriend is pregnant." His voice was flat, emotionless. "She's 18 years younger than me. I guess what I'm saying is, I'm leaving you, Anna. Getting a divorce. That's cool with you, right?" I gripped the phone tighter, the edges digging into my palm. My other hand involuntarily clenched into a fist, an outward display of the inner turmoil I was struggling to suppress. After years of tension and disappointment, I should have been prepared for something like this. But the sheer audacity of his request left me momentarily speechless. Before I could formulate a response, my thoughts were interrupted by a more pressing concern: the well-being of our son, or rather my stepson, Sam. At 16, he would be far from oblivious to the goings-on in our suddenly fractured household. He had always been a sensitive kid, finely attuned to the fault lines of our family. As if on cue, a soft knocking came from the door of the study, the only room I considered mine in the sprawling house that Paul and I shared. "Mom, is everything all right?" It was Sam's voice, tinged with the worry that I had come to recognize all too well. Momentarily neglecting Paul, who was still droning on about something or another, I softened my voice and replied, "I'll be out in a minute, sweetie. Just wrapping up a call." Turning back to the matter at hand, I found my voice. "Listen, Paul, we'll discuss the divorce later. What's most important now is Samantha. If we're going through with this, you need to take responsibility for him. For now, please just let this settle before you do anything else rash." There was a pause on the other end, and then an exasperated sigh. "Anna, don't start with this. He's your kid too." Technically, he was right, but the unpleasant truth, and perhaps my most powerful card, was still tucked tightly against my chest, a reminder of the complex emotional and legal dynamics that had bound our little family together. The silence on my end seemed to unnerve him, and he blurted out, "You know what? Fine, we'll talk about this later." And with that, he hung up. Releasing a sigh I hadn't realized I was holding, I placed the phone down and pinched the bridge of my nose, an ineffectual attempt to fend off the headache brewing just beneath the surface. Sam was waiting just outside the door when I emerged, his eyes searching mine for an explanation I wasn't yet ready to provide. I mustered a reassuring smile and looped an arm around his shoulders, guiding him back to the living room. "Let's not worry about that call," I said, although we both knew that was a near impossibility. "Why don't you tell me about your day instead?" And as he launched into a story about his latest project in art class, I clung to the normalcy of our conversation like a lifeline, knowing full well that the storm clouds were gathering just beyond the horizon. That night, as the house lay quiet and shadows played against the walls from the street lamps outside, my mind began to drift back in time. The memories came unbidden, a cascade of moments revealing a completely different version of the man I had married. I settled into my armchair, a relic from my pre-Paul days, and let the past unravel itself. I was 27 when I met Paul, an independent marketing expert with a penchant for brand revival. He came to me as a client, but soon became more. We were both rebounding from past relationships. Mine was a tale of young love that burned out too brightly, and his was a marriage wrecked by infidelity. It didn't take long for Paul to sweep me into a whirlwind romance, complete with tender looks and promises of always putting family first. His son, whom he had full custody of, was named Sam. At the tender age of 3, the boy had a mop of curly hair and eyes so wide they seemed to swallow the world around him. Paul would bring him along on our dates, saying, "Just until we find a good sitter." But as time went by, it became an unspoken arrangement, one that didn't bother me as much as I thought it might. Despite my initial reservations, there were fleeting moments where our trio felt like a glimpse of the family life I'd never known I wanted. It was both cozy and exciting, and I began to think that perhaps I could step into this role that the universe had seemingly carved out just for me. So when Paul proposed a year into our relationship, presenting not only a ring but a family unit, I said yes, with hardly a second thought. but the rosy glow of new marriage faded with startling rapidity. As soon as our honeymoon was over, literally and metaphorically, the real Paul began to surface. His facade of a doting father cracked and fell away, leaving behind a man who seemed increasingly indifferent to his son's existence. Work was always his convenient excuse. Even when the underlying note of sadness in Sam's voice couldn't be missed, Paul would shrug it off, leaving me to soothe away the sting of abandonment. I tried to voice my concerns, but Paul's temper flared up easily. "It's not your place," he would say, dismissing my attempts to navigate a healthy dynamic between father and son. As time wore on, I tried to be everything Sam needed, steadfast and present, unlike his father. I attended school plays alone, cheering twice as loud to make up for the space where Paul should have been. And with every small absence, with every unkept promise, a bitter seed of resentment took root in my heart. Now, in the subdued light of my living room, as sleep teased at the edges of my consciousness, I couldn't help but wonder when exactly my marriage had slipped from being a partnership to a performance, and at what point I had lost myself in this charade of family life. The morning sun filtered through the blinds, casting lines of light and shadow across my face. I took a moment to steel myself for whatever trials the day might bring, after last night's revelations. The silence of the house was a stark contrast to the chaos of my thoughts. Sam was still asleep, his door ajar and his breathing steady. I let out a quiet sigh of relief that he could at least find some peace during these turbulent times. The urge to protect him from the incoming storm was visceral, but I could not hide forever behind a facade of calm domesticity. Hesitantly, I revisited the idea of returning to work, part-time at least. It wasn't just about the money, although our family's financial future was uncertain with the looming divorce. It was about regaining a semblance of the independence I had once taken for granted. I remembered my conversation with Paul about this a few years back. "A part-time job?" Paul had scoffed, slouched on the couch with a beer in hand. "What's that for? Some pocket money for shopping?" His laughter still echoed in my mind, a bitter reminder of his condescension. "It's for Sam." I had shot back, my voice firm. "He's growing up, and there are expenses, school supplies, extracurricular activities, and I want to help." Paul's only response had been a shrug before he dimmed the room with the TV's glow. But the next morning, when his head was clearer, he had grudgingly agreed, tossing the declaration at me like it was a breadcrumb. And so I slipped back into a familiar role in the marketing world, but on my own terms. My former boss had welcomed me back with open arms, aware of the tumultuous tide I was navigating at home. The balancing act was taxing, juggling domestic duties with the demands of work, but it provided a lifeline. A reminder that I was more than just someone's cast-off wife. It felt invigorating to reclaim a piece of my identity. That liberation was cut short one evening when my work commitments saw me arriving home later than usual to find Paul pacing in the foyer, a snarl twisting his lips. "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I was at my part-time job," I replied, weary and not in the mood for another confrontation. "Meeting some man, right?" He seized my arm, his fingers biting into my skin. "Is that it, Anna? Tell me!" The absurd accusation struck me like a slap. Paul's distrust was a grotesque mirror that reflected his infidelities, not mine. I wrenched my arm away from his grip, denial falling from my lips in heated, vehement waves. But Paul, never one to back down, demanded to see my phone, to delve into the intricacies of a life he so often shunned. I watched frozen as he dialed my boss's number, that single action shattering any facade of trust we might have still shared. I could have drowned in the silence that followed my boss's clear-cut clarification. Paul's lame attempt at an excuse was nothing more than a shrug and a suggestion that I should have been more careful, if only to save him the embarrassment. Since then, my days were colored with a rising dread of future altercations, a dread that had seeped steadily into my heart, setting up residence alongside the growing hollow of my love for Paul. Now, as I sat upright in my armchair, a cup of cold coffee abandoned on the table before me, the inevitability of our situation settled heavily upon my shoulders. We were past the point of repair. The notion of us existed now only in the fragmented memories of a time when I believed in the possibility of a happy ending. As the days slipped by in an unsettled quiet, life took on a stuttering rhythm. I tried to protect Sam from the growing tensions while I navigated the minefield that my marriage had become. I felt a cold knot at the pit of my stomach every time I caught sight of Paul's car parked outside, his comings and goings now as erratic as his moods. One afternoon, my work took me near Paul's corporate office, a swanky high-rise that seemed to scrape the clouds. A familiar prickling discomfort grew within me as I walked by. Even after all these years, I had never quite come to consider that towering glass monolith as a part of my world. It was Paul's territory, a place where I had little reason or desire to venture until now. As fate would have it, I caught sight of Paul's car parked across the street. There was a figure seated beside him, unmistakable by its youthfulness and the animated gestures that accompanied a fit of laughter between them. With a heavy heart, I realized this must be the younger girlfriend, the one carrying his child. My hands shook with a volatile mix of anger and anxiety as I snapped a picture. I didn't know what I intended to do with it, but the private investigator my friend had mentioned once seemed like a good place to start. Secrecy wasn't something with which I was comfortable, yet the situation seemed to call for it. As the evidence of Paul's duplicity gathered in the hands of the PI, a morbid sense of satisfaction intermingled with my pain. It was ironic how the truth often surfaces when one starts digging in the right places. At home, Sam's obliviousness was a mercy and a curse. The moments we shared, him asking for help with his college applications or discussing his art projects, were pockets of normalcy that kept me anchored. Yet the looming specter of the truth felt heavier by the day. How long could I keep this all from him, and when the time came, how would he view his father or me? Paul seemed oblivious to the undercurrents, too consumed by his extramarital escapades to notice, or perhaps he simply didn't care. Our interactions were stilted, and more often than not, he wore an expression of annoyance that would crescendo into aggression if pressed. It was during one of these strained conversations that the dam finally broke. Clutching the preliminary report from the PI, I let my gaze harden when I addressed him. "I don't know which is worse," I started, the frost in my voice matching the icy glare I fixed on him. "The fact that you're cheating, or that you were so sloppy about hiding it." Paul's reaction was a bizarre blend of shock and defiance. "What are you talking about, Anna?" "I'm talking about your barely legal mistress and the baby that you claim is yours." I pushed the paper across the table, watching as his eyes darted over the incriminating photos and the sterile, typed-up accounts of his infidelity. The room went dead silent for a second too long before I eventually added, "You're going to need to take better care of Sam. He's your responsibility, Paul." "You can't mean that," Paul retorted weakly. "What about everything we've been through?" I mustered the full force of my resolve when I addressed him, the cut of betrayal slicing through each word. "Because, Paul, as much as I love Sam, I've never legally adopted him. He's not my child, he's yours with your ex-wife." Paul's stunned silence was answer enough. The truth hung between us an unscalable wall. It was a final acknowledgement of a relationship that had been fraying at the seams long before his affair. In the quiet aftermath, I slipped silently out of the room and made my way to the one place I now considered an asylum, Sam's room. His earnest smile and oblivious chatter were the only consolation I had left in the ever-complicating mess of my married life. Sitting at the kitchen table the next morning, I sipped my tea, staring at the steam curling upwards like wistful spirits seeking escape from their liquid confines. The house was too quiet, the kind of silence that seems to press against your ears, a silence ripe with words not yet spoken, truths not yet revealed. There was a knock at the door, solemn and perfunctory. It was Paul, his face a grim mask of confrontation, his jaw twitching with pent-up frustration. In tow was Emma, the young woman whose involvement with my husband had upended my life. Her belly was now showing the early signs of pregnancy, and she moved with the tentative touch of someone navigating new terrain. "Anna," Paul began, "we need to talk." The frigid air between us crackled with tension as I remained silent, nodding slightly for him to continue. With hesitant boldness, Emma spoke up. "I've heard a lot about you. And Sam. He's a good kid, right? You've been parenting him for over a decade." "Indeed," I replied coolly. "Sam is a remarkable young man." Then why abandon him now? Emma's voice wavered slightly, betraying her underlying apprehension. The question stung, but I kept my composure. It's not a matter of want, Emma. Legally speaking, he is not my child. I could see the confusion in her eyes, her furtive glances at Paul searching for reassurance or explanation. Paul, seemingly prepared for a different outcome, appeared lost. But we're married, Anna. Isn't that enough? No, it's not, I said firmly. To make a stepchild one's own, one must legally adopt them. I never did. Adoption? Emma frowned, the concept foreign to her. Exactly, I continued. Without that, I have no claim over Sam, no obligations or rights. Paul's face paled. What does this mean for us, then? It means you're fully responsible for Sam's upbringing. I am not abandoning him, but I cannot, in good legal conscience, take him with me. Your actions have consequences, Paul. There was a pause as the weight of my words settled over us like a shroud. Look, this is a mess, I concluded, standing up. I'm willing to discuss a fair divorce settlement, but Sam's care is not negotiable. He's your son. The conversation ended with Paul's defeatist surrender. Emma's protests were cut short by a simple, yet stern look. They left in a huff, the door closing behind them with a decisive click, the sound echoing the closing chapter of our marriage. It was only after their car was out of sight that I allowed myself a single solitary tear. My grief was not for the loss of Paul, already a ghost in my heart, but for the upheaval that Sam's life was about to undergo. I vowed then and there to protect him as much as I could, no matter the legal ties that bound or separated us. Days passed in a haze of legal consultations and muted emotions. I navigated through them with the determination of someone who knows there's no turning back. Every ring of the phone, every knock on the door, I was braced for another battle, another bitter exchange. In a strange turn of the tide, Paul's inevitable retaliation came not in the form of tantrums or threats, but with him dragging Emma into the sanctity of our home. The tension was thick, a tangible entity as they stood there, a united but unstable front. Anna, Paul began, urgency bordering on desperation clouding his voice. You can't just back out and let everything fall apart because our situation changed. I could only nod, urging him to continue while mentally preparing my counter-argument. I was not going to be swayed by emotional pleas or twisted logic. Emma, her arms protectively cradling her unborn future, found her voice amidst the unease. Surely there's a way you can keep Sam. You were his mother for so long. Her words hung in the air, and I felt a pang of sympathy for her, caught in the crossfire of our crumbling marriage. Emma, I did not abandon Sam. Paul did when he chose to pursue a relationship outside of our marriage. One cannot just discard responsibilities because it's inconvenient, I replied, my voice even but firm. The legality of my relationship with Sam is clear. No formal adoption, no parental rights. It's always been that way. The confusion in Emma's eyes mirrored the same dawning realization I saw in Paul's. It was then I decided to divulge the final nail in their contrived coffin. I retrieved the folder containing the evidence of Emma's infidelity, the product of the private investigator's thorough work. Her breath hitched audibly as she scanned the photos and accompanying reports. This child, I began, placing an incriminating photo of Emma with a man, not Paul, on the table. It doesn't belong to you, does it, Paul? Silence consumed the room as Paul's gaze fixated on the photograph, slowly twisting from confusion to anger. He rounded on Emma with glaring accusation. Is this true? His voice was barely above a whisper, but each word was laced with betrayal. Emma's stammered denial, negated by the evidence before her eyes, only fueled Paul's fury. You led me on. Paul's words were venomous, his expression an amalgam of rage and hurt. Observing the scene unfold with a detached, academic interest, I felt the chains of my marriage finally slacken. Do what you must with each other. Sam and I will adapt, as we always have. I expect you'll do the same, I uttered with finality, excusing myself from the brewing storm. As I made my way to the haven of my study, their heated exchanges muffled by the closed door, I focused on the sound of my steady breaths and the knowledge that Sam and I would face brighter days ahead. It was not the end of our story, merely the beginning of a new chapter. In the wake of the crumbling illusions and the raw truths laid bare, my thoughts turned toward the future with a steely resolve. It was within the confines of my study, among the legal pads scribbled with thoughts and potential strategies, that I formulated my next steps. A decisive course of action was necessary, both for Sam's well-being and for my emancipation from the life I had known. I reached out to my attorney, a meticulous and forthright woman named Miss Carter, who had been a guardian angel of sorts throughout this ordeal. "It's time to discuss the terms of the divorce and the division of property," I told her over a secure line, each word a hammer driving nails into the coffin of my marriage. Miss Carter assured me she would arrange for us to move forward with pragmatic efficiency, and I trusted her implicitly. Preparing for this legal battle was like bracing for a storm. Security measures were a necessity, not a luxury. Within days, a meeting was orchestrated to discuss the partition of our lives into neatly quantifiable assets and liabilities. Paul's disposition fluctuated between anger and spiteful acquiescence. But through it all, I remained firmly anchored to my objectives. As if play-acting the part of the dutiful wife one last time, I served coffee and brought out the ledger of our once-shared existence, slipping into the uncomfortable but familiar role of his domestic partner. Trying to eke out my dignity from our divide was akin to navigating a boat through rocky shoals, each potential compromise on material possessions a risk that might capsize an already unstable situation. But Sam's future was the lighthouse guiding me. Everything I did was to ensure he would not be left adrift in the wake of our split. Paul hesitated, his expression a mask of consternation as we discussed alimony and the financial stipulations going forward. "How can we possibly unwind everything we've built?" he asked, a note of plea underlying his usual assertiveness. "We can, and we will," I assured him, my tone laced with an undercurrent of fatigue. "It's not just about us anymore." The air grew colder, the silence starker, as we both signed the papers that would render our shared history into nothing more than a transaction, an exchange of worldly goods and bruised promises. I hesitated only once, my pen hovering over the document as the finality of it all settled into my bones. Each stroke of my signature was a release, a liberation from the ties that no longer served me, or Sam. As Paul left, his departure was without the dramatic flourish of our past arguments. Instead, a quiet, anticlimactic exit that allowed the gentle closing of the door to serve as his final goodbye. Retreating to the solace of my solitude, I reflected on what it meant to let go, to relinquish the dreams of what could have been for the reality of what must be. In the quiet aftermath, a newfound sense of pride welled within me. I would steer my destiny with a steady hand, come what may. The jagged edge of reality set in as I sat at my vanity, staring into the mirror at the woman I had become. A woman hardened by betrayal, but not broken by it. With each brushstroke through my hair, I steeled myself for the confrontation to come. I was tired of the shadow games and half-truths. It was time to drag everything into the light. Donning my armor of a charcoal business suit that accentuated my newfound resolve, I arrived at Paul's place of work, a towering testament to his professional success and personal failures. Blending into the anonymous flow of the city's morning hustle, I passed through the revolving doors of his corporate fortress with one objective: to ensure there would be no further avoidance or delays in the settlement of our divorce. Paul's supervisor, Mr. Green, was a man I had met but a few times, always in the periphery of company galas and charitable events. His demeanor carried the gravity of someone who understood the weight of his position, and as I sat in the waiting area of his office, I folded my hands, ready to lay out my case. The door to Mr. Green's office opened, and Paul's figure appeared, confusion marring his otherwise stern features. He had clearly been interrupted, pulled from whatever business matters had occupied his day. I could sense his annoyance, but the burning urgency in my gaze was enough to silence whatever complaint he might have vocalized. Mr. Green extended his hand, a practiced smile affixed to his face as he addressed me. "Miss Simmons, what brings you to our office today?" I took a deep breath, framing my thoughts into coherent sentences. The matter at hand is personal, but it has reached a point where I can no longer wait for my soon-to-be ex-husband to do the right thing. Our divorce must proceed, and I need assurance he will cooperate. Paul stiffened, his eyes darting to Mr. Green, then back to me. It was clear he had never anticipated our private discord intersecting with his professional life. "Please understand, Mr. Green, I continued. My visit here is not to scandalize or to seek retribution, but to move forward with transparency and closure. The air between us was charged, the hum of company operations outside Mr. Green's door now a distant murmur. I watched as Mr. Green considered my words, his expression morphing from one of cordiality to concern. I assure you, Mr. Green, I finished, that our personal grievances will not impact Paul's responsibilities here at the company. I am merely seeking resolution so we may both proceed with our lives. Paul's protests were interwoven with pleas for discretion, but the truth couldn't be simpler. We were beyond the point of secrets and saving face. With a nod, Mr. Green assured me he would encourage Paul's cooperation. The meeting adjourned with a heavy finality, leaving me to navigate my way back out into the bustle of the city. As I walked, the gravity of my actions began to sink in. I had walked into the lion's den unflinching, laying bare the truth to the powers that would most impact Paul's decision-making. It wasn't long before news of the scandal made its way through the office grapevine. Paul and Emma's illicit relationship, once shrouded in whispers, was now cast into the unforgiving light of day. Emma's position within the company, intertwined as it was with her personal entanglements, became unmanageable. The fallout was swift and irrevocable for both of them, their reputations tarnished and their professional standing compromised. I returned home to the quiet of my study, allowing myself the brief luxury of unraveled composure. The sky outside was overcast, heavy with unreleased rain, a mirror to my own emotional state. Paul and Emma's fate was no longer my concern. I had severed the ties that bound me to their downfall. It was time for me to focus on the path ahead, to embrace whatever came next, with eyes wide open and heart slowly mending. Now, with the anticipation of an uncertain future tingling at my fingertips, I prepared myself for the next chapter, one that I would author on my own terms. The following weeks brought a whirlwind of change and, unexpectedly, hope. I was offered a full-time position at the marketing firm where I had found solace in part-time work, a lifeline that became a vessel for transformation. Gripping the opportunity with both hands, I dove into the work I loved, allowing it to support and reshape the newfound life that Sam and I were building. Sam was navigating his own changes, adapting to the shifting landscape of our family structure with a maturity beyond his years. Discussions of college applications and plans for the future became our new anchor points as we forged ahead in unison. One evening, as the soft glow of the sunset bathed the living room in warmth, Sam approached me, hesitant yet excited. "Mom," he began, "there's someone I want you to meet. I'm seeing someone, and, well, I think you'll like her." His words touched a tender spot within me. Even as he spoke, he fidgeted with the hem of his shirt, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. "Sam, I'd be delighted to meet her," I assured him, my heart swelling. "But are you sure you're okay with me being there? I mean, after everything." He stopped me with a look, a knowing, reassuring gaze. "Mom, no matter how things ended with Paul, you were always there for me. You're my family. I want you to be part of this." As we shared a warm embrace, I realized that our bonds were indeed stronger than I had ever dared to hope. Sam's resilience and love gave me the strength to be the parent he deserved, regardless of any legal definition. With the official divorce proceedings behind us, my life took on a different rhythm, one filled with promise and productivity. The undertow of loneliness that often accompanied my nights slowly ebbed away, replaced by a sense of peace and fulfillment. Sam's presence was a constant reminder of the continuity of love and care I had provided over the years. Our interactions became less about filling the gaps left by Paul and more about celebrating each milestone, each victory, no matter how small. The college acceptance letter arrived like a beacon of triumph, its crisp white envelope holding so much more than just words. Inside was validation of Sam's talent, determination, and the future he was destined to seize. As he read the contents aloud, his voice crackled with emotion, and I felt my own chest tighten with pride. My own eyes grew misty as he looked up at me, the joy in his face mirrored in my own smile. This was our victory, one made sweeter by the struggles we had overcome. Whatever lay ahead, I knew we would face it together, buoyed by the understanding that family is not merely defined by blood, but by the shared experiences and unconditional support that bonds us. And as Sam set his sights on the horizon, ready to embrace college life and all the challenges it would bring. I stood by, ready to support him as I had always promised, as I would always do. With each passing day, the woman I saw in the mirror grew stronger, surer, a testament to the resilience of the human spirit, forged in the fire of adversity and emerging, triumphant and hopeful, into the light of a new beginning. Months melded into a new kind of normalcy, the raw wounds of the past now healing into scars, reminders of battles fought and strength earned. In the solitude of my revitalized life, news of Paul and Emma reached me only in fragments, echoes of the life I had left behind. Through conversations with Mr. Green, whom I had come to regard as an ally in the corporate world, I learned that the once cohesive front Paul and Emma had presented had crumbled into a spectacle of blame and acrimony. The affair, once shrouded in secrecy, was now a specter that haunted their professional and personal lives with equal persistence. Their relationship buckled under the weight of public scrutiny and personal betrayals. Without the security of established careers at Paul's company, they found themselves adrift in a sea of their own making. The court battle over Emma's claims of emotional abuse and her subsequent demands for compensation was a drawn-out affair, leaving them both exposed and vulnerable. In the end, it was not just their careers that suffered a fatal blow, but their relationship too. Emma, still pregnant and now shouldering the disdain of her family, retreated from the public eye and the ire of her once lover. Paul, meanwhile, found himself unemployed at an age where starting over was more of a challenge than a prospect. Reports suggested he eventually settled for a part-time position at a local store, a shadow of his former glory. As these whispers of their struggles reached me, I found myself reflecting not with malice, but with a somber acknowledgement of life's unpredictable tides. There was no joy in their downfall, only the quiet affirmation that every choice leads us down a path of our own making. For Sam and me, the path was one of growth and newfound harmony. As he embarked on his college journey, I watched him navigate his newfound independence with the same resilience and integrity that had seen him through the chaos of our fractured family life. It was a bittersweet farewell when I dropped him off at his dormitory, but one filled with the promise of his bright future. Back in the fortress of my own rebuilding, surrounded by the familiar comforts of a home that had seen too much yet stood resilient, my career flourished. Returning as a full-time employee had reignited a passion that I had thought lost, infusing my days with purpose and fulfillment. In moments of solitude, I would sometimes catch myself marveling at the strength and serenity that had grown from the ashes of my previous life. There was a newfound sense of self that permeated every aspect of my existence, a calm confidence that whispered assurances of the possibilities that lay ahead. In the evenings when the golden glow of sunset bathed my garden in its warm embrace, I would think of Sam's parting words, that regardless of our lack of legal tie, I had always been and would always remain his true parent, in every sense that truly mattered. It was in these quiet moments that I knew the love and bonds we shared transcended all else. Our narrative had been one of trials and transformation, with the final pages yet to be written. Together and yet apart, we moved forward into our separate futures. A son stepping boldly into the world he would shape, and a mother standing proud, her resolve unshaken, ready for whatever chapters were yet to come.
I'm building the ideal family with my new wife and this child right here. So, I'm divorcing you. You and your son need to leave this house immediately. My husband raised his voice with a snort. He had started a company making children's clothes when I was pregnant. Initially, he worked earnestly, but now he spends his days playing. And the company's management is barely hanging on. In the midst of dealing with my parents' death, he suddenly showed up with his mistress and their child. Confused, my son and I thought it unwise to argue in front of the house. So I let the three of them in. Suddenly, they demanded that my son and I leave the house. Despite the difficult situation of my parents' passing, my husband's unreasonable demands infuriated me. I was dumbstruck and couldn't respond. However, My son snorted. Hey, what's with that insolent attitude? Dad, it's impossible for you to divorce Mom. What are you talking about? A divorce can be done with just a single form. Don't you even know that, being a high school student? But, as my son began to explain, Scott's face turned pale. My name is Michelle Ford, a 47-year-old part-time homemaker. I help out with my family business part-time. I have one child, my son Aaron, a 16-year-old high school student. I've been married to Scott for 17 years. He's the president of an apparel company. Scott spends his days playing, though we can't afford such a lifestyle. The company barely makes a profit, and we're in a dire financial state. Scott's income is unreliable, and he spends most of his salary on leisure. So it feels like I'm supporting our family with my part-time income. Aaron is very kind and always helps with household chores. However, he is cold towards Scott, and they do not speak to each other. Initially, I thought it was just a rebellious phase, but since he's kind to me, I realize it's because he dislikes Scott. Soon after starting high school, Aaron began working part-time. Scott and I met through work. I was working as a fashion magazine editor, and Scott was a designer at an apparel company. We met during a meeting to discuss featuring his company's products in a date outfit feature. The point of this outfit is to match the shoes and skirt colors to make the legs look slimmer. The color is white, which I think adds a sense of purity. That sounds great. The focus is clear, and it looks like it'll make for an understandable feature. Thank you. I've prepared a lot because it's been a while since I've had such a meeting. Scott was very serious, and he made various proposals during the meeting. After seeing him, I imagined that building a family with him would lead to a fun future. One day, when my company and Scott's had a dinner meeting, a tipsy Scott opened up to me. I want to dress my kids in the clothes I design. So, someday, I want to marry a good wife and have her give birth to adorable children. Have you ever designed children's clothes, Scott? Yeah, when I first joined the company, I was in charge of designing children's clothes. That's a wonderful dream. I also want to help make such beautiful dreams come true. Michelle, you have nice dreams too. After that, Scott asked for my contact details. We became close and eventually, Scott confessed his feelings, and we started dating. We were both nearing our 30s and married within a year of dating. I became pregnant soon after our wedding. During the early stages of pregnancy, I temporarily quit my part-time job and struggled with morning sickness. Hey, Scott. Why are you home this morning? I've decided to quit my job and start my own business. I think now is the time to make my dreams come true. Starting your own business? At a time like this, when a child is about to be born, I was taken aback. Don't worry, a client told me they have a job they want me to do. So there will be work. I see. But starting an apparel company requires a lot of preparations, right? Like, you need money for an office and to buy equipment. Yeah. But I don't have much money for preparations. Disappointed by Scott's lack of planning, I desperately searched for places to borrow money. However, all bank applications were denied. Preparing for the worst, I consulted my parents, who then offered to help Scott establish his company. They probably did so because they were expecting a grandchild. I'm truly grateful for my parents' kindness. Scott worked hard every day for the upcoming child. Although he often came home late from work, he never complained when I couldn't cook due to morning sickness. On weekends, he actively took on laundry and cleaning. However, Scott's attitude changed drastically one day, the day our child was born. When my water broke at night, Scott rushed me to the hospital. "Scott, is your work okay?" "It's fine. There are no pressing business deals or deadlines. So I'll stay with you throughout. Don't worry about me, just focus on yourself." Scott spoke kindly and firmly held my hand as I struggled through labor. A few hours later, the birth was successfully completed. "Congratulations. It's a healthy baby boy." "A boy?" "Yes, a healthy baby boy." "Is there something wrong?" The nurse was puzzled, but Scott's solemn face didn't change. In fact, Scott had been hoping for a girl since I got pregnant. He often handled projects for girls' children's clothing at work. And since starting his own business, he had been working as a designer specializing in girls' children's clothing. During my pregnancy, all his children's clothing designs were for girls. And he had spent the entire time expecting a girl. We moved to the maternity ward, but Scott's disappointed expression remained. "Scott, it's a boy." "I'm sorry. Why isn't it a girl?" "There's nothing we can do. The gynecologist said there was a high chance of it being a boy. And, more importantly, we can't control the gender of our child. Then put the child in a baby box until you give birth to a girl." "What? I would never do such a horrible thing. Whether the child is a boy or a girl, they are my irreplaceable child." Scott began to distance himself from me. And I found myself raising our child alone. Hoping his depression was temporary, I persevered in housework and childcare with support from my parents. I also returned to part-time work, working hard every day. My coworkers were supportive of my parenting, and when Aaron was young, I could even bring him to work. However, as Aaron grew, Scott continued to neglect our family. Eventually, Scott's days away from home increased, as did his late returns. "Dad, I won a gold medal in the summer vacation art competition." "Huh, so? What are you trying to say?" "What do I mean?" "Ah, are you trying to brag that you have more artistic talent than me?" "No, that's not what I mean." "Scott, don't upset Aaron. Why don't you praise him a little?" "Shut up." Fine, it's a nice painting." Scott, clearly in a bad mood, slammed the door shut. His attitude towards Aaron was terrible. And he never participated in Aaron's school events. Whether it was the entrance ceremony, open class, music recitals, or graduation, his father was never present, which made Aaron feel alienated. Over time, Aaron grew to detest his father. Then, a significant turning point arrived. One Sunday, while I was cooking dinner, I received a call from my sister. "Hello, is that you, big sis?" "Michelle. Mom and Dad have passed away." "They passed away." The sudden news left me in shock. They had helped us so much since Aaron was born. I hadn't been able to repay them, and I was at a loss for words. "Why?" "They were fine when I saw them at Christmas. They were hit by a car that ran a red light." "Can you come to the hospital right now?" "Scott and Aaron haven't returned yet, so I'll head over as soon as they're back." I ended the call with trembling hands. When would Scott return? He hadn't told me when he would be back. So I didn't know when I could go to the hospital. I tried calling Scott but couldn't reach him. Even my messages were left unread. Why now, of all times? Despite my irritation, I was sinking into sorrow. "Mom, what's wrong?" "Oh, sorry. Don't worry about it. What were you talking about on the phone just now?" Actually, your grandparents have passed away. So when your father returns, we're going to the hospital where your grandparents are. Understood. Aaron sat down on the sofa with a sad expression. Then I heard a car stop. Looking through the window to our driveway, I saw Scott's car. Good, Scott's back. Wait, what? Next to Scott was a woman dressed in high-end brands. Her flashy nails well manicured, a woman of tastes quite different from mine. Flamboyant and ostentatious. Beside the woman was a child dressed in pink. Could she be an acquaintance of Scott's? Is the child hers? But Scott was holding the woman's hand. Who was this woman? My mind was in chaos, and I panicked. Hey Michelle. It's me. Open up. Without even ringing the intercom, Scott was rattling the entrance door. To avoid further commotion, I hurriedly opened the door. Scott, welcome back. There's a crisis right now. Who is this? I stared at the woman next to Scott. She held his arm confidently, as if she had been waiting to introduce herself. Nice to meet you. I'm Scott's wife, Kristen. Hey, Kristen. Calling yourself the wife is a bit premature, isn't it? Scott and Kristen began cooing in sickly sweet voices. And who might this child next to you be, Kristen? Nicole, say hello. Nice to meet you, I'm Nicole. Nicole is the child Kristen and I have together. Kristen gave me a girl, unlike you. A child. My body tensed up. Could it be that Scott had a mistress and a child while he was away from home? Hey Michelle, let us in. I have something to talk about. All right. With no choice but to continue the conversation inside, I followed Scott's direction and let him and his mistress into the house. Guests? Yes, it seems Dad brought his mistress. Mistress. Dad was having an affair? It looks like it. We're about to have a detailed talk. Can I sit in on this too? If Aaron wants to join, that's fine. I hesitated to involve Aaron in what might be a messy situation. But seeing his serious expression and realizing he was old enough to understand, I let him sit next to me. We moved Nicole to another room and sat down. Kristen across from me, Scott across from Aaron. Scott seemed displeased with Aaron's presence, but I decided to proceed regardless. I'm building the ideal family with Kristen and Nicole in this house. So, Michelle, I'm divorcing you. You and Aaron need to leave this house right now. Scott, you're so cool. Scott raised his voice with a snort while Kristen gazed at him with starry eyes. I was sick of their couple-like behavior, and it made me nauseous. Despite the dire situation of my parents' passing, my husband's outrageous statements infuriated me. I was dumbstruck and couldn't respond. However, Aaron snorted in disdain. Hey Aaron, what's with that cheeky attitude? Dad, it's impossible for you to divorce Mom. What are you talking about? A divorce can be done with just a single form. Don't you know that, being a high school student? Dad, you haven't repaid the money Grandpa lent to the company, have you? Scott's face turned pale all at once. Kristen looked puzzled. I almost burst out laughing seeing the temperature difference in their expressions. In fact, Scott had borrowed money from my parents, with the promise to repay it gradually once the company stabilized. However, Scott had been making excuses to delay repayment. Could it be, Dad, that you wanted to divorce to escape repaying? But that's not going to work. Grandpa told me to make sure you repay. When did you make such a promise? Were you with my father-in-law while I was gone? I've actually been meeting with Grandma and Grandpa quite a bit. Where did you meet them? At my part-time job, Grandpa's company. Don't you even know where your child works? You're lying. This is the first time I've heard of it. Yes, in fact, my son had been working part-time at my parents' company. Aaron, having seen me support the family all this time, wanted to help me someday. When he entered high school, he expressed his desire to work part-time. When he was wondering where to work, I suggested to my parents that he work at their company. Then, my parents happily agreed, saying it would be good training for an heir. Initially, Aaron was assigned simple clerical work. But he also got involved in tasks like advising on new products, which could be handled by someone young, and he enjoyed his work. Since starting the part-time job, Aaron had become more reliable. His words were stronger than anyone else's. And I almost cried with joy seeing how hard he had worked raising him. So, Scott, make sure you repay the $100,000 our parents lent, okay? Encouraged by Aaron's words, I delivered the final blow to Scott. Scott, what's this about? You told me you were a department head at a major apparel company with an annual income of $100,000. Is this debt of $100,000 real? Kristen. It's not true. What he's saying is nonsense. I can show you proof if you want. I have the loan repayment agreement at home. Stop it, Michelle. Ignoring Scott's words, I showed the repayment agreement we had signed when we received the financial support. Scott collapsed to his knees. There's no way I can pay back such a large amount of money. It's impossible. Scott. This story is true, isn't it? Dad, like I said earlier, you can't divorce until you repay the money. Shut up. If that's the case, Kristen, can you take over my debt? I'll repay it quickly for Nicole's sake. Kristen, what do you think? We could get married right away, right? Kristen's face turned increasingly red. Scott, you liar. I didn't know anything about this. First of all, this debt isn't something I created. Scott and Kristen suddenly started arguing. Aaron looked down on them with a disgusted expression. For Aaron's sake too, please don't show us such an ugly sight. I picked up Nicole, who was in another room, and kicked out Scott, Kristen, and Nicole from the house. Mom, let's hire a detective to claim compensation from Dad. Yes, I'll think about it. I felt proud of my son's dependable appearance. Then I made a phone call. Hello, it's me. I have a favor to ask, is that okay? When I explained the situation to the person, they replied, Understood, let's start moving on it tomorrow, in a gentle voice. After that, I spent several busy weeks. There were lots of things to do, like the funeral for my parents and taking over the company. I was sleeping late and waking up early, leading to days of sleep deprivation. I ended up with a bad cold and couldn't go to work for a while. Aaron cared for my health and did the housework after school. While eating the rice porridge Aaron made, the intercom rang. Michelle. Open up quickly. I staggered to the entrance and slowly opened the door. What's the matter, Scott? Why did you come all of a sudden? My company has been leveled. Where did my company go? Company? What are you talking about? There's no such company. Did you do something? You shouldn't just get rid of the company I started for my dream. Despite feeling unwell, Scott grabbed me by the collar. As I was coughing, he seemed to realize something and suddenly pushed me away. I stumbled and fell to the floor. What, a cold? Don't spread your filthy germs to me, disgusting. Isn't that a terrible way to treat Michelle? I think it's very rude. Tracy. Emerging from the back of the room was my sister Tracy. She has always been strong on justice and very strict with people who do not keep promises or rules. Since Aaron was born, Scott had become slovenly and was quite afraid of my sister. Why are you in the house? To discuss that, can you stop rampaging at the entrance and come inside? Overwhelmed by my sister's pressure, Scott reluctantly entered the house. With a dominating look, my sister stared down at Scott, who trembled like a small animal frightened by its natural predator. Tracy, why are you in the house right now? I needed to discuss the company takeover with Michelle. Company takeover? What are you talking about? Ah, right. Actually, I've absorbed and merged your company. Absorption merger. I haven't heard anything about that. Scott's shoulders shook violently. I wanted to laugh out loud seeing his pitiful state. But knowing my sister would scold me for such behavior, I held back my emotions. In fact, Tracy had been managing Scott's company for quite some time. Scott had neglected the business due to his affair, and the company was almost bankrupt. I, busy with my part-time job, hadn't realized it. But when Tracy investigated Scott's company, she found it was drowning in red ink. Knowing a lot about business management, Tracy thought she would try to turn the company around. Scott's management was quite terrible, but the quality of the products he was creating was quite good. So, I thought it might be a good idea to rebuild it under my company. But, an absorption merger like this without notice is illegal. I'll sue. Well, why don't you check the loan repayment agreement first? Hey Michelle, get out the loan repayment agreement. At Scott's request, I pulled the loan repayment agreement from the drawer. When Scott saw the agreement, his eyes widened as if he saw something he shouldn't have. What is this? The agreement stated that the company was registered under my parents' names. Yes, Scott's company was established under the ownership of my parents. Actually, all the paperwork and necessary administrative tasks for setting up the company were done by my parents and Tracy. Therefore, they were able to change the company's registration to my parents' names without Scott noticing. With the passing of my parents, Tracy inherited half of their estate, which included Scott's company. Initially hesitant about the merger, I talked to Tracy about Scott and suggested that we get rid of Scott's company without his knowledge. That's when she told me about the inheritance. So, my company will become Tracy's property. Yes. We will be asking you to leave the company. Tracy. Could you at least hire me as a designer? Scott suddenly became humble, but his intentions were transparent. And Tracy glared at him. That's impossible. This strategy was to get rid of you, so hiring you is out of the question. So, does that mean I'll be unemployed? Yes, well, good luck. Scott stood there, dumbfounded. By the way, I have something to show you, Scott. I pulled out several photos from an envelope. The photos showed Kristen enjoying walks to hotels and shopping with men who were not Scott. Moreover, the companions were different in each photo. Some older than Scott, some younger. When I first saw these photos, I was fed up with Kristen's irresponsibility. Scott looked at the photos in shock. Kristen, you're walking with a man who isn't me. This isn't some kind of composite, is it? Actually, I hired a detective agency to catch your affair. It turned out Kristen was involved with multiple men. She might be something of a sugar baby. So, Nicole's father might not be me. It seems so. The detective said it wasn't you. Maybe you should get a DNA test. Seeing Scott about to cry, I decided to deliver the final blow. Scott, I can no longer be with you as a wife. I want a divorce. Also, I'll need compensation, child support for Aaron, and the repayment of the capital that my parents fronted, totaling about $150,000. I can't pay that kind of money, Michelle. Please, give me another chance. It's impossible. I've completely lost feelings for you. As Scott broke down crying on all fours, Tracy looked on blankly. Scott, no matter how much you struggle, it's hopeless. The damage you've done to Michelle can't be resolved with money. So, you must take responsibility at the very least. Crying, Scott turned to Tracy. Then shakily sat back down and slowly began to sign the divorce papers I laid out. After that, Scott incurred significant debt to pay the compensation and funds owed. Initially, I thought about allowing him to pay in installments. But Aaron advised against it. Do you think someone as unreliable as Dad can pay in installments? He'll definitely default. Realizing he was right, I demanded payment in full, as Aaron suggested. Scott's parents, concerned about their social standing, did not help with his debts. Unemployed, Scott struggled to find a new job. Having been virtually jobless for over 10 years, no company would hire him. He ended up working odd jobs introduced by debt collectors. I also demanded compensation from Kristen. She took on debt and worked day and night, as an office worker by day and a nightclub worker by night. Incidentally, the DNA test confirmed, as the detective had said, that Scott and Nicole were not related. Now, I run the company Tracy handed over to me, with Aaron helping with new product proposals. Mom, I want to use softer materials for our next product. That's a great idea. Let's try it. Working with Aaron is truly enjoyable, and he inspires me daily. What shall we do today? I live motivated by the joy of my work. You had leukemia, didn't you? Can't believe you're still alive. My father, who had chosen his mistress over me, and my mother 15 years ago when I was diagnosed at age 10, uttered these unbelievable words when we unexpectedly met at a restaurant. And who's that girl next to you? Surely she's not your child. The father's gaze shifted to Mia, who sat beside me, his expression sour. Yes, she's my daughter. I got married 3 years ago. I thought you'd be struggling and living in poverty. Just like you and your mother, always a burden to society. Angered by his words, I stood up, unable to tolerate any insult towards my mother, who had raised me single-handedly. Well, it's been a while. Welcome to my restaurant. My father, surprised by my mother's words, visibly widened his eyes in clear astonishment. What, you're joking? That's not funny at all. Oh, I'll explain properly then. Seeking revenge, my mother began to tell him about our current lives. I'm Anna, 25 years old. Today, I am here for lunch at a famous hamburger specialty restaurant, with my husband Tony and our 1-year-old daughter Mia. This popular restaurant recently expanded its stores, a place we had always wanted to visit. My mother was supposed to join us for lunch too, but she's running late due to a train delay. Mama, gimme. Yes, just wait a bit longer. I watched my daughter, Mia, pointing at the food on the next table, clearly hungry and begging for food. Did you hear from Mom? Yes, she just arrived at the station. She should be here soon. Do you think the restaurant is hard to find? I'll go pick her up from the station. Tony, thank you. With that, Tony quickly put on his coat and left the restaurant. I thought, he's always so thoughtful. I'm glad I married him. I've always wanted a warm family because my parents divorced when I was 10. My mother told me that even when I was little, my father prioritized having fun over taking care of his kids. I remember him ignoring me even when I was sick in bed, and my parents often fought. Still, my mother took great care of me. She always came to my school events, but my father, busy with work, never came. The turning point for our family came when I was 10. One day, I was bedridden at home with a high fever. Every doctor we saw said it was just a cold. However, the fever continued for weeks without any sign of subsiding. As 2 weeks approached, my parents argued about whether to take me to a university hospital. I've told you many times. She's had a high fever for 2 weeks. It's just a coincidence. The doctor said it's a cold. Besides, do you know how much it costs to go to a university hospital? It's just a waste of money. How can you say that when Anna is suffering? Just do whatever you want. I'm not giving you any money. With that, my father left. I was delirious, but I still remember his back as he walked away. Shortly after, my mother took me to the university hospital, and I underwent a thorough examination. When it was over, the doctor spoke seriously to my mother. Please stay calm. The tests show she has leukemia. That can't be. If we had delayed the tests any longer, it could have been dangerous. You did well to bring her in. Hearing that, my mother apparently cried, relieved she hadn't made a mistake. I was soon admitted to the hospital and began treatment. Fortunately, the treatment started quickly and I was young enough to recover well. So my condition stabilized in about a month. My mother had kept in touch with my father, but he never visited during my hospitalization. When I was discharged and returned home, my father was no longer there. As I was confused, my mother calmly explained. Anna, listen carefully. Your father probably won't come back. Mom, what do you mean? Your father had been seeing another woman. As soon as he found out you were sick, he stopped contacting us. I guessed he would just leave. Can't I see Dad anymore? He chose his mistress over us. Understanding this, I felt an overwhelming sadness. Seeing me about to cry, my mother hugged me gently. It's okay, you have me. I won't let you feel lonely. As she said that, she hugged me even tighter. From then on, she raised me alone. While working, she took care of me and showered me with love. Though our time together was short, I never felt lonely. Gradually, I wanted to become a strong and kind woman like her. As I remembered these old times, I waited for Tony to return with my mother. Then, a familiar voice called out my name. Anna, is that you? I turned around in surprise to see an elderly man in ragged clothes. His beard was overgrown, and his hair looked unwashed for days. He was far from well dressed. I thought, I feel like I've seen him somewhere. I racked my brain but couldn't remember where. As I looked puzzled, the man laughed mockingly. Don't you remember your own father's face? You're still foolish as ever. Dad. Why are you here? What do you mean why? I came to eat. Is that a problem? Not really. Indeed, his smiling face resembled my father's from long ago. But my father should be 55 now. The man standing before me, dressed as he was, looked over 70. I thought I would never see my father again after he abandoned us. As a child, every time I remembered him and felt sad, I tried hard to forget him. Perhaps that's why I didn't recognize him immediately. More than the joy of seeing my father after so many years, I felt a complex mix of emotions. At a loss for words, my father spoke again. I mean, I didn't think you'd still be alive. What do you mean? You know, you had leukemia, right? Thanks to Mom taking me to the hospital right away, I recovered quickly. I still go to the hospital regularly. If we had delayed even a little, I might not have been able to live a normal life. That's good. I thought, his casual remark, after he insisted on leaving me alone back then. I felt anger rise within me as my father laughed it off as if it were someone else's problem. I glared at him, but he continued the conversation without concern. So, who's the girl next to you? Surely not your child. I looked at Mia sitting beside me. My father's expression was somewhat displeased. Yes, she's my daughter. I got married 3 years ago. Her name is Mia. She's 1 year old. What's the problem? It's none of your business. I thought you'd be struggling and living in poverty. After all, you and Susan are just burdens to society. How dare you say that? I stood up abruptly and raised my voice. Mia looked up at me, startled. I knew talking to him was pointless. I understood that. But I couldn't stand him insulting my mother, who had endured so much to raise me. Indeed, at the time, it seems it was quite a struggle to come up with the money for my sudden hospitalization and subsequent frequent visits. I saw my mother pleading with the hospital to delay payments while I was admitted. That's why I am so grateful and respectful toward her. And each time, my disdain for my father grew. With Mia present and not wanting to disturb the other customers, I couldn't afford to start a fight here. As my father and I were glaring at each other, Tony returned with my mother. Seeing me standing, Tony asked worriedly, Anna, what happened? And who is this man? This is my father. What? I thought your parents divorced when you were little. Why is he here? I don't know. He just happened to be here. So, I came here to eat. Got a problem with that? My father said grumpily, creating a tense atmosphere among us. Then my mother, standing behind Tony, addressed my father. Wow, long time no see. How many years has it been? You're here too. It's been a while. I never thought we'd meet again. Why are you here? This place is popular lately, right? Wanted to try it out. Oh, I'm glad. Welcome to my restaurant. My father's eyes widened, clearly taken aback by my mother's words. And he began to laugh weakly. Your restaurant? That's a good joke. It's no joke. This is my restaurant. Well, one of many I own. What do you mean? My father was confused by my mother's unexpected statement. But she explained calmly. Just as I said. I own this hamburger specialty store. It was originally a small business started by my father. After you left, I started helping out to make ends meet. Thanks to Mom getting involved, the stores started to multiply. Aren't we about to go national soon? No way you could do that. It's just a coincidence, isn't it? My father seemed unwilling to acknowledge my mother's success. Just as I was about to retort, Tony spoke up. Father, no offense, but maybe it's time you accepted it? Are you Anna's husband? What does this have to do with you? What do you even know? Well, it does concern me. Actually, I work at the corporate headquarters of this company. That's right. Tony is one of our promising young executives. He's currently working as an executive candidate at the headquarters. Susan's ideas and proposals are always customer-oriented and have gained a lot of support within the company. Thank you. I have high expectations for you. No, thank you very much. Tony and my mother spoke happily. Seeing them, I felt proud. Glancing at my father, his mouth hung open in shock. He looked down on my mother, who had become a company owner, and me, a frail child who married a promising young employee and had a child. He couldn't accept that the two he abandoned were leading happy lives. What? I don't care about you guys. With that parting shot, my father hurried to the entrance. However, he hadn't paid yet and was stopped by a staff member trying to leave the restaurant without paying. He was then taken to the back office. After a while, a police car pulled up in front of the store. 3 officers entered and headed to the office. Watching the scene, a person who appeared to be the manager hurried over to my mother to explain the situation. It turns out my father was a habitual offender of dining and dashing. Not just at this hamburger store, but he had also caused trouble at other nearby stores. This time, he was caught in the act and arrested. He's been resisting the police. I could hear him talking loudly. It seems he's been having trouble with his family, and that led to his actions. After saying this to my mother, the manager returned to the office. I wondered what kind of situation had led my once hardworking father to resort to such measures. Seeing the father who had lost all semblance of his former self, I felt a bit of pity. The atmosphere at our table went completely silent. Then, my mother suddenly clapped her hands, looking at me and Tony. Now that the troublemaker is gone, let's enjoy a delicious meal. Mom. The new seasonal hamburger is really something special. Tony, I'm sorry for involving you in our family issues. No, I don't mind at all. As my mother spoke, I felt my tense heart begin to relax. She must have been trying to create a bright atmosphere for me and Tony. I thought, I guess I still can't match up to my mother. With that thought, I decided to forget about my father and enjoy lunch with the 4 of us. A few days later, I received a call from an unknown number on my smartphone. I thought, I've been contacting various places lately for Mia's daycare. Maybe it's related to that. I didn't have any strong leads, but I answered the phone anyway. To my dismay, it was the last voice I wanted to hear. It was my father. Hello? Anna? Dad? How did you get my number? Well, that doesn't matter, does it? Laughing carelessly, I wondered where he had gotten my number. Despite my anxiety, now wasn't the time to worry about that. The more pressing question was why he had called. Given that he had been driven to petty crimes, I didn't know what to expect from him now. I cautiously asked him, "So, what do you want? What are you planning to do to us? Hey, don't be so cold. I've actually got a good proposal for you and your mom." What do you mean by a good proposal? Listen up and be happy. I'll remarry Susan. Knowing her, she's probably still single, right? Dad, do you realize what you're saying? Of course, I do. Aren't you happy? Is this man insane? How could he think that abandoning us and then proposing to remarry would make us happy? There's no way my mother would accept it. How could I be happy about that? Have you forgotten what you did to us in the past? You mean when I left? If you want me to apologize, I'm sorry. The selfishness of my father infuriates me. I feel like I might say something harsh in anger. But I can't upset him now. I have my mother, Tony, and Mia to think about. I need to stay calm for their sake. My left hand, holding the smartphone, trembles with anger. Gripping it with my right hand to steady it, I asked my father. So, what brought this on all of a sudden? What happened with the woman you were with? Oh, her? After I left home, a while later, we had a son. I see. I thought I'd live happily with my new family. Especially since my sick daughter was out of the picture. But that woman, she was reckless with money. Even after our son was born, she never stopped going out. Kept buying designer bags, and before I knew it, she had run up debts without my knowledge. By the time I realized, she had vanished. My father spoke calmly about his situation, which was more troubled than I had imagined. I had assumed he was living happily after leaving us, but it seems that was not the case. His disheveled appearance and his dine-and-dash habits now made sense. He must have had his struggles. But that doesn't mean I should feel sorry for him. Look, she's got money, right? Think of it as filial piety and ask your mom, would you? Unbelievable. What? Don't bring this up now. How could you think I would forgive you? Hey, calm down. I am calm. Handle your own money. And don't ever involve us again. With that, I hung up the phone. He abandoned my mother and me when we were vulnerable. And now he turns to us when he's in trouble. He truly is the worst. I immediately informed my mother about the call. So I told him never to contact us again. I see. I'm sorry you had to go through that, Anna. It's okay. It's unbelievable, though. Did he really think I'd accept such a ridiculous proposal? My mother sighed in disbelief. She told me to ignore any further attempts to contact us and hung up the phone. Just as my mother predicted, calls from what seemed to be my father's number came several times. I ignored all of them, and eventually, they stopped. He must have given up after being ignored so thoroughly. One day, I took Mia to visit my mother, who had just finished a busy period and was happy to see her granddaughter. Mia was also having a great time. While chatting with my mother and playing with Mia, the doorbell suddenly rang. Oh, what could that be? Maybe it's a delivery? Should I get it? You keep playing with Mia. Would you? Thank you. I stood up and went to the intercom. My blood ran cold when I saw who was on the screen. It was my father. I thought, how? I never told him where we moved. My heart raced as I struggled to stay calm and breathed deeply. Mom, Dad's here. What do you mean? He shouldn't know where we live since he left and we moved. He might have come here because I ignored his calls. But how did he find the house? While talking with my mother, the doorbell rang again. We decided to pretend no one was home, trying not to make any noise. However, the doorbell continued to ring repeatedly. Despite our continued silence, the knocking on the front door began, growing louder and more insistent. Hey, I know you're in there. Open the door. What should we do? You guys have money. Hurry up and hand it over. My father was getting increasingly agitated, raising his voice dangerously. It wasn't safe anymore, not for my mom or Mia. Something had to be done. Just then, my mother suddenly stood up and walked toward the door. And to my disbelief, she opened it. I thought, Mom, what are you doing? I hurried after her to the entrance. As my mother opened the door, my father tried to barge in. Despite this, my mother began to speak calmly. "What are you doing? It's about time you opened up. You have money, right? Hand it over quickly." "Yes, we do have money. But there's none for you." Just as my father attempted to strike her, a police officer grabbed his arm from behind. "All right, calm down, please." "The police? We received a call earlier. You're under arrest for trespassing." "Trespassing? But she's my wife." Ignoring my father's protests, the police officers quickly restrained him and took him to their patrol car. As I stood there dumbfounded, my mother calmly locked the door. "Mom, how could you remain so calm? You said there was a call earlier, but who?" "Oh, I called the police while you were checking the intercom." "Really? I didn't notice at all." The police can't arrest someone without catching them in the act. That's why I deliberately let him in. As I slumped down, exhausted by the ordeal, my mother chuckled. How strong could one person be? I wondered if I would ever catch up to her. Later, we were informed by the police that my father was jailed. He was not only arrested for this incident but was also charged with multiple other offenses, including shoplifting and dine and dashing. Unable to afford bail, he remained in custody. My mother also concerned herself with my father's son, contacting child services. They later informed us that the boy, now a junior in high school, was living in a facility. He was doing well and excelling academically. So they assured us there wasn't much to worry about. Although he wasn't living with his father, he occasionally visited him. "Look, Mia, here's the new hamburger. Eat up." "Thanks, Grandma." Years have passed, and Mia has grown significantly. Watching their cheerful conversation fills me with happiness. I never thought I'd be so disrupted by my father at this age. While I feel sorry for him, I certainly don't aspire to be like him. Instead, I'll use his example as a lesson on how not to live, striving for a happy life. My name is Wendy Hansen. I'm a 30-year-old office worker, and currently in the happiest state of my life as I'm about to get married. My life has been filled with sadness until now. Ever since my younger sister, Emma, was born, I've felt lonely. My mother occasionally paid attention to me, but mostly it was all about Emma. Emma was allowed to take various lessons, whereas I was never given such opportunities. I'm graduating from this sad and difficult environment. I'm marrying Robert, whom I've been dating for many years. I didn't like going to my parents' house, but I had to visit for the marriage greeting. When I arrived, Emma was waiting with a smile. I muttered words to myself, but kept a pleasant face and began the greetings. Then, Emma constantly ridiculed him until she found out what he was doing. After that, it was a barrage of questions for Robert. She ignored me and kept asking him questions. I had a bad feeling, but nothing happened. And we were able to have our wedding without issues. I cherished the joy of marrying the man I love, wearing the wedding dress I had dreamed of. As the ceremony progressed and we were about to kiss, a dramatic scene unfolded. Wait a minute. Suddenly, my sister stood up. What now? Sister, how could you do this to me? What's wrong? Everyone, please listen. My sister looks happy, but she stole him from me. We've been together for a long time, but my sister. She's making a happy face after stealing my boyfriend. The child in my stomach is his child. Please give him back to me. Wendy, as a sister, what are you doing? Stealing a boyfriend from your cute sister. The wedding is off. Either that or change the bride. Your father's order is absolute. Sister, please, give him back to me. Emma was crying and clinging to me, and our father kept making appeals. What are you talking about? You. What are you laughing at? Unbelievable. Please give me a break. Robert, you're laughing too? Why are you laughing? Well, that's right. You left pregnant Emma for Wendy, didn't you? That's the worst. Dad, Emma, please give me a break. I can't stop laughing. All this time, you've only been a nuisance to my life. And now you've even come to disrupt my wedding? Sister, that's awful. I'm pregnant. That's why I'm laughing. Because, you know, when I continued speaking, Emma and our father were shocked. We already knew that Emma would disrupt the wedding like this. Why did we know? Because Robert had been telling me everything Emma was doing to him. I've been talking to Robert about my parents and Emma since we were kids. Therefore, Robert was worried about me. That's why whenever Emma took any action, Robert informed me immediately. Since Robert went to greet my parents for our marriage, Emma had been clinging to him non-stop. She became interested in him because he said he was a company president. Robert and I have been together since elementary school, childhood friends. While my parents went out to buy new clothes for Emma or to her lesson recitals, I couldn't understand why I was never taken along and spent my time alone in the park. I knew they always went to eat barbecue after Emma's recitals. So I once asked my father why I couldn't go. He said, "We don't have the money to take you." If that was the case, they should have stopped the 5 different lessons Emma was taking. But I couldn't understand why I, who was born first, was treated so casually. As sad as it was, I thought it was pointless to say anything. So I always played alone in the park when my father and Emma were away. The one who played with me was Robert. Robert didn't have family problems and was raised by wonderful parents. His parents, always worried about me, told their classmate Robert, "Play with her. It's dangerous for a girl to be alone," and he always came to play. I really liked Robert from a young age, and he gradually started to like me too. In middle school, we began dating. What Robert said then was, "At first it was more like playing with a little sister, but gradually I came to like you." Indeed, at first, it was probably out of pity. However, our relationship has continued since middle school. When Emma first encountered Robert and me together in high school, I returned home to hear, "I can't stand to see people happy. But if it's such an unattractive guy, I don't need him." Sister, you're plain, so he suits you. Such a boring and plain guy, just right for my sister. Sister is so dull, no one will ever love you, so he's just right for you. Have you seen my boyfriend? I just stole him from a classmate, he's the most handsome guy in school. Despite being sisters, the difference in our boyfriends is like heaven and earth. Sister, you can't compare to me in anything. In studies, sports, number of friends, number of lovers, and even our parents' love. Right. Are we done here? Oh dear. You're sulking because I hit the nail on the head. It was always like this. But I love Robert, and that's enough for me. Indeed, I can't compare to Emma in studies, sports, the number of friends, or past lovers, nor the affection from our parents. But none of that matters. I have a loving partner and friends. While family certainly means blood relations, being connected by blood is all it is. Family isn't the only source of love, nor the only place where I can give love. I might be seen as lonely, but I'm fine with that. I have been with Robert all this time, but during that period, Emma has been dating various men. Every week, a different man would visit our house, which honestly disgusted me. I disliked it so much that I spent a lot of time at Robert's house. His parents are incredibly kind, and being with them was always comfortable. They would say every day, "Marry soon and come live with us." I was truly happy. When I returned home, I would return to a house under Queen Emma's reign. "Emma, what about your driver's license? I can drive when I turn 16, right? If so, I want a car when I turn 16. Then get Wendy to buy it for you. She's starting a job next month, right? Once she gets her first paycheck, she should take out a loan and buy a car." "That's a great idea. Sister, please. That plain boyfriend of yours, his parents seem to have strong connections, right? It wouldn't be bad if they bought you a car under the pretext it's for my sister." "Enough already. What do you think I am? But you're the older sister? You are Emma's sister, aren't you? Then act like it. Always a nuisance at home." "What are you thinking? Hey. Did I just say I'm always a nuisance? How much of a nuisance have I been? I even paid back my high school tuition with part-time jobs. And my junior college tuition was almost nothing since I entered as a scholarship student. And I paid it with my own part-time job earnings. I even paid for my license with savings, and I plan to buy a car once I start working. Give me a break. I'll be leaving home next week. Do whatever you like." Saying this, I went into my room. Even my room was the attic. As Emma grew and accumulated more stuff, my room became Emma's. And I was relegated to the attic. This life is over for me. Starting next week, I stayed at Robert's parents' house. Once I got a job, Robert and I planned to move to New York. So I decided to stay with them for a while. Since then, I had virtually no contact with my family until the marriage greeting. And I hadn't met Emma or my parents even once. When we finally met for the marriage greeting after a long time, Emma greeted us with a smirk. When she realized my boyfriend was Robert, she burst into laughter. "Oh dear. Even that plain guy has improved a bit. But he's not on my level. What a relief." I was worried what I would do if my sister's boyfriend turned out to be high-spec. But I guess I didn't need to worry. Robert is Wendy's boyfriend? He can't be decent. Right. I worried for nothing. She began to mock us. And? What is that plain guy even doing? It'd be great if he was still a freeter at this age. "Nice to meet you again, I'm Robert Hansen. I'm currently the president of a venture company in New York. The reason our marriage was delayed was because it took time to get the company off the ground, but now we are finally able to marry. It seems we're not very welcome here, so now that the greetings are done, we'll take our leave." "Huh? What? President? What? Wendy's husband is a president?" "That's right. So, goodbye. We'll send the wedding invitation later, but if you don't come, that's fine too." As Robert and I tried to leave the house, "Wait. If you're going, go alone. Robert is also becoming family, we'd like to talk to him." "No, I have nothing to discuss, so excuse us." Saying this, Robert took my hand and we left the house. "It's just as you said. Their eyes changed the moment you said president. That's embarrassing. Sorry for making you feel uncomfortable." "It's okay. Wendy, you did nothing wrong. Thank you." Saying this, we returned to our normal life, but a change occurred the next day. Emma went out of her way to come to New York and started hitting on Robert. She searched for his name online, found his company, and tried to get involved. However, Robert isn't the type to be swayed by such things. Whether she disliked that or was fueled because he was unattainable, in the end, she tried to get a job at Robert's company by interviewing, but of course, she was rejected. I thought she would give up after this, but to my surprise, she started a relationship with one of the company's managers. Then she would ask about Robert's drinking parties from the manager, and tried to show up pretending to be there coincidentally, or even tried to force her way into a taxi Robert was taking. She kept taking the worst actions, knowing she had been acting this way. I could laugh when she made such assertions at the wedding. And there was another reason why we were laughing. It was because Robert cannot have children. We found out Robert was infertile when we both underwent a bridal check before. The reason my marriage was delayed wasn't only because of the time it took to stabilize his company, but also because Robert was resisting, thinking I might want children. In fact, we were already engaged when I started working, and Robert was launching his business. We were supposed to get married immediately, but unexpected issues extended our engagement to nearly 10 years. During that time, Robert and I had faced many conflicts. I can't have a family. You can have children, but you can't build a happy family with me. That's why you shouldn't marry me. Why would you say that? I've never known a happy family before. I wasn't even loved by my parents, so what does a happy family mean? Moreover, I don't even know if I can love my own children. I just don't know how to love. But I was certainly happy receiving love from you and your parents. However, I honestly don't know how cute my own children would be. I just don't know. But it's okay. I love you. So, let's not talk about children anymore. For now, just focus on getting the company on track, and once it's settled, marry me. If you hate me and never want to deal with me again, that's fine. But if you feel even a little upset seeing me walking with another man, you must still love me, right? Is it okay? If you leave me, I will appear before you walking with another man I don't know. I hate that. Are you really okay with that? Of course. Please, let's stay together so Robert cannot have children. I didn't want to say this in front of everyone as it might hurt Robert, but he made it clear. I can't have children. So, it's impossible that you have my child. I am infertile. There was a moment of silence in the venue after Robert's confession. However, gradually, applause broke out. It must have been a round of applause moved by his courageous confession. Emma's face was contorted, and all eyes in the venue were directed at her with not a gentle expression. Everyone was looking at her coldly. Come on. She started it. Let's listen carefully. Whose child is it, and why did she disrupt our happiest day? Can we get an answer? It was the first time I saw Robert looking so intimidating, even though we have been together since elementary school. Whose child is it? You need to tell us clearly. Could it be that you don't even know whose child it is? Because you've been involved with someone from our company? As Robert pressed her, Emma's face grew more and more contorted. Then, a manager from Robert's company who was sitting in the middle of the venue stood up. Didn't you tell me before that you were pregnant with my child and took money from me to get an abortion? How did it become Robert's child? Explain that. Following this, voices rose from the venue one after another. I also gave her $1,000, me too. As Robert said, Emma had been involved with many people from his company. It was truly chaotic. What kind of wedding is this? I don't know if the father ever thought such a thing would happen, or really believed it was Robert's child, but he just stood there stunned. However, suddenly, he began yelling. If someone in the company got my daughter pregnant, you as the president should take responsibility. You should just marry Emma quickly. Come on, Wendy. You are her sister, right? Give up your place to her. I was so appalled I was on the verge of tears. Then, it wasn't Robert who shouted but my mother. Enough. Aren't you ashamed? Mom? I'm truly embarrassed. Wendy, I'm really sorry. I made a mistake raising Emma. I'm really sorry. When I was a child, I always felt neglected because my parents spent all their time on my older sister, and I thought if I ever had siblings, I wouldn't want them to feel that way. So I talked with your father about treating my sister equally. But maybe out of my own unfortunate experiences, I ended up prioritizing Emma for lessons and shopping. It's all my fault. I'm truly sorry. Emma. You need to apologize properly for this. Really, stop it now. My mother was confessing to me. Honestly, with everything that had happened, even when my mother said this, I couldn't just say, Mom, it's okay. Thank you. However, instead of reflecting after being scolded by our mother, Emma said, yes, it's Mom's fault. So, it's not my fault. Robert? Shall we have our vow kiss? It will all be settled then. Once we take our vows, I win. Saying this, Emma approached Robert. However, Robert refused. When she pushed a little, Emma stumbled and fell. Nonetheless, undeterred, she approached Robert again. Wait, Emma, weren't you pregnant? Pregnant? Because normally, if you were, wouldn't you panic after falling? Oh. Emma looked awkward. You, perhaps. Yes. Yes, exactly. I was never pregnant. I just thought if I said I was pregnant, people panicked and started giving me money because I didn't have any. Everyone just throws money without thinking. It's really stupid, right? People can't take responsibility for their actions. I just took money from those who have it because what I got from Dad wasn't enough. I did nothing wrong, and those who gave me money are just stupid. The thing is, I just hate my sister. Despite always being favored, she was loved by more people at school than I was. I had many friends, but they didn't really like me. They were just after the guys around me. Any man I dated and broke up with would immediately start dating my friends. And some of them even got married. They seemed bored from the moment they started dating me. But they looked happy dating my friends. And if I ever took a guy from a friend, everyone would abandon me. It was just because those men were stupid to follow me. Everyone is just using me. Yet my sister gets to go out with her close friends, and Robert is always all about her. Even Robert's family values her. What is that about? And, Mom always said she cared about me. But she was always going on about buying something for my sister. I did have my parents spend money on me. But I never felt loved. They think spending money is love. But what I really wanted was to be praised no matter what. It was never about praise for me, just rewards like barbecues, toys, or clothes. Mom would praise my sister when she scored well on tests. But when I did well, Dad would just say, Emma got good grades. We'll have to reward her after her lessons are done, and I never got praised. It's always about my sister. No one really cares about me. Robert just likes pitiful people, right? You see? I'm really pitiful, right? Why don't you switch to me? Don't be ridiculous. Sure, it's sad not to be praised, but what you've done is truly despicable. Always trying to one-up Wendy. And even disrupting such an important ceremony like this. I really hate people like you. And you seem to have hurt quite a few employees at the company. In my company, I only have capable and trustworthy staff. I don't usually give directives about personal lives. But to think that so many were deceived by someone like you is truly a terrible situation. This ceremony cannot go on. It will be postponed. And that will incur costs. You will be billed for those expenses. And I will also seek reimbursement for the money you defrauded from my employees. Unless you refund everything, I can file a police report. What you do next will greatly affect your future. What is that? Despite liking pitiful women, why am I not good enough? Wendy is not pitiful at all. My love for Wendy isn't out of pity. Wendy is always cheerful. She talks about what happens, but she never speaks ill of you or your parents. Plus, she always has dreams and works hard towards them. I found that very attractive. When I was starting up the company and it was tough, Wendy was also going through hard times. But she supported me. And Wendy didn't tell you, but she is now running a company too. Ever since we were in middle school, Wendy talked about starting a business. We talked about our dreams together. That was really fun. Wendy has channeled all her anger towards you into her dreams. And made significant strides. The way she can turn her negative feelings into energy so beautifully is truly amazing. Wendy and you are entirely different. You always blame others. But Wendy doesn't blame anyone. There's nothing to blame her for. Unfortunately, I can never forgive you. I will always love only Wendy. I've only lived for 30 years. But in that short life, I have loved Wendy for 20 years. I am confident that I will continue to love only Wendy forever. With that, Robert kissed me. The priest, who was surprised by what was happening, smiled and said, "I guess that's a vow. I'm not sure if this is okay, but for now, our ceremony is concluded." Robert's colleagues were angry with Emma, and my associates were giving her cold looks. I informed everyone to leave the venue and announced that we would hold a party on another day. Robert, my parents, Emma, and Robert's parents also joined the discussion. And we all decided that all the expenses from this incident would be charged to Emma. Although she complained, what awaited Emma was a lawsuit from the employees of Robert's company. She had already spent all the money and claimed she had none left, then ran away. Her miserable escape was such that no one bothered to chase after her. Weeks passed without any word from Emma. However, she eventually appeared before me. "Sister, you're really the worst. Emma, everyone was worried about you." "Worried? Just about whether they could get their money back?" "What do you mean?" "Never mind. I'm now in debt hell. And sister, you have Robert's money and your own from starting a business. Don't you think that's unfair?" "So, I've been thinking. You're just too happy, aren't you, sister? So, I need to make you unhappy. What are you planning to do? You only have Robert, right? Then I should just take Robert from you." "Robert won't be going to you." "I know that. But what if I became a criminal?" "His company would end, he would disappear from your life. And it might even affect your company. What are you planning to do?" "I'll throw myself in front of the car Robert is driving. I don't care what happens to me, I can handle that much." "What are you saying? Are you okay?" "I'm not okay. How am I supposed to live with no money? If it hurts you and Robert, that's fine by me. Is that so? Well, let me tell you something. Robert never drives himself, he has a chauffeur. And since I use trains, I don't ride in cars much. So your plan might not work as you think. Unfortunately, whatever you try to do is meaningless. Also, this lifestyle ends tomorrow. We had our wedding in the US, and now we're moving abroad. Robert has delegated his company to other staff members in the US. And we're moving to France to start a new company. The business we talked about starting? It's something Robert and I are doing together. We've always wanted to work in France. So, our dream is coming true. I know what you want to do to us, but we're no longer paying attention to you. I don't know what will happen to you, but as an adult, you should take responsibility for your actions. With that, Emma crumbled. I passed by her and entered the company. As Emma had said, she fell into debt hell. Several of Robert's company's employees sued her. And she tried to ask our father for help, but our mother refused. Emma was disowned and left the house. She tried to find work, but nothing went well, and she eventually turned to nightlife jobs. However, due to her selfish nature, she couldn't build good relationships with clients and was fired from several places. Eventually, with no money, she considered robbing a bank. I'm Emma. Give me the money, she declared without a weapon. Just barging into the bank, which led to her immediate arrest. Our parents didn't come to her rescue this time. Due to the stupidity of the robbery, it made the news. And Emma was quickly released, but likely won't be able to live in the US anymore. However, with no money, Emma is now working in a factory. She never paid us back for the wedding. But she's suffering more than enough, so it doesn't matter. I don't know what kind of life she will have from now on, but it's unlikely to be a good one. Robert and I are still happily living together. Life abroad was unfamiliar, but life with Robert has been happy. We'll continue to live together, aiming for our dreams. I'm sure that together, Robert and I can achieve our dreams in France. I truly believe that from the bottom of my heart. I guess there's no helping it now that the affair has come to light. For your sake, I'll divorce you. But you're going to have to take care of that bedridden old hag. One day, I was heading to a day spa with my disabled mother-in-law. However, I had to return home because I forgot something. And caught my husband cheating. Realizing that I had seen him, my husband brazenly said something unbelievable. I was trembling with anger at the affair and his disregard for his mother. But I returned to the car where my mother-in-law was waiting, and explained the situation. I was so shocked by my husband's betrayal that I didn't know what to do. My mother-in-law kindly showed concern for me. Don't worry about the future. I have a plan. I was astonished by what I was told then. My husband had no idea back then. He didn't know that a future of being crushed by the truth awaited him. My name is Amy Owen, 35 years old. My maiden name was Johnson. Howard Owen and I married after a romance that began at work. Let me start with my life before I got married. I worked for a trading company before we married. Let's work hard today too. I might say so myself, but I think I was good at my job. And I found it fulfilling, so romance was a secondary concern. You're always so enthusiastic about your work. If you keep this up, you'll delay your marriage. I'm not interested in that right now, so it's fine. Work is my lover, maybe? Humph, you're so smug, it annoys me. I won't lose to you in work or love. That's nice. Anyway, let's do our best at work. The person who said this was Susan Fisher. Susan and I were colleagues. And she always seemed to see me as a rival. Always coming at me this way, but I just ignored her. Then one day, a new male employee joined the company. Hello, I'm Howard Owen. I'm looking forward to working with you all. This new employee would later become my husband, Howard. At first, I didn't consider him as a romantic prospect. Amy, you look beautiful today too. Oh, thank you. How about we go out for dinner after work? Sure, why not? How about going to a movie next time? That sounds nice. Let's go. Howard kept making advances, and gradually I found myself attracted to him. Then, Amy, I like you. Would you go out with me? If you're okay with someone like me, I'd be glad to. Thus, we started dating. We enjoyed many dates and spent a lot of time together. Then one day, at a fancy restaurant with a beautiful night view. After enjoying our meal, Howard looked at me earnestly and said, I will always protect you, Amy. Please marry me. Really? I'm so happy. Thank you, Howard. Overwhelmed by the perfect situation and Howard's earnestness, I agreed, and we decided to get married. There were things that needed to be done now that our marriage was decided. Like meeting each other's parents. Howard had talked with his parents and arranged a schedule. And I nervously went to meet his parents. Hello, I'm Amy. I'm going to marry Howard. Nice to meet you. You don't have to be so nervous. I'm happy that you're going to be Howard's wife. Thank you. Howard's mother greeted me with a kind smile. I had heard from Howard before the meeting that his father had passed away long before I met him, and Howard's mother had raised him by herself. Since my parents had also passed away early, I was really relieved by his mother's kind smile. And I was truly happy that this person would be my mother-in-law. I thought, maybe it's reassuring that this person is going to be my mother-in-law. I thought that I could get along well with my mother-in-law. And I was hoping that my married life with Howard would go smoothly. Then one day, a phone call came to Howard's mobile phone. When he answered it, Howard looked very surprised. Seeing his expression, I knew something serious was up, so I asked Howard about it. I just got a call from the hospital saying that my mom had an accident and was injured. It seems she was taken by ambulance. What? How is she injured? I don't know. Let's go to the hospital where my mom was taken. Yeah, right. Confused by the sudden news, we decided to go to the hospital where his mother had been taken. When we arrived at the hospital, we saw the painful sight of his mother. When she noticed us, she said, Oh, Howard, Amy. I'm sorry for causing trouble. Don't worry about it. Just focus on getting better, please. Exactly, don't worry about us. As we reassured her, she started to cry and said, I won't be able to walk anymore. What? That's terrible. It was when I was shocked by my mother-in-law's story. Are you family members of Ms. Owen? The doctor who had been treating my mother-in-law approached us. Perhaps my mother-in-law was just feeling down from the shock of her injury. I hoped the doctor could clarify the truth for us, but the response we received was, the condition of Ms. Owen's injury is that she has compound fractures in both femurs. We'll operate, but it's unlikely she'll be able to move as before. Does that mean she will be bedridden? I'm afraid that is a strong possibility. That's terrible. The news from the doctor was harsh. I couldn't believe that what my mother-in-law had said was actually true. Eventually, she would have to stay in the hospital for treatment. And during that time, my husband and I decided to discuss our future. I never imagined this would happen. Really. I wonder what will happen to my mom's life now. I was genuinely concerned about my mother-in-law's future. Would being bedridden mean she would need constant care? As I pondered this, a memory suddenly came to mind. It was the kind smile my mother-in-law had given me when we first met to discuss the marriage. I wanted to protect that gentle smile. That's when I made a decision. We should live with your mom. What? I'll quit my job and become a full-time housewife. I'll take good care of your mom. Amy, are you sure? Thank you, that will be a big help. Thus, it was settled that after my mother-in-law was discharged, she would live with us, and I would take care of her as a housewife. At first, I was inexperienced and sometimes puzzled by the care she needed. Howard, the meal is ready. Could you bring it to your mom? Oh, okay. Howard sometimes helped with her care, which was a relief. Thanks for helping around the house despite your busy work. It's no problem. I should be thanking you for taking care of my mom. I was truly grateful for Howard's cooperation. Life was challenging, but I felt we could overcome anything together. However, this belief would be shattered years later. I'm home. Hi, you're late again today. The busy season has started at work. It's been hectic lately. I see. Don't overdo it, okay? Yeah, I understand. Howard had been coming home late every day recently. Since I had quit my job, I wasn't aware of the changes at his company. I just assumed he was genuinely busy and tried not to think too deeply about it. I thought, but we haven't talked much lately. While I told myself that his late returns were unavoidable, it also meant that our conversations had decreased. We didn't have children, which might have been affecting us as well. Even so, I felt a bit lonely. One day, Howard suggested something. Why don't you and Mom go to a day spa and relax? Wait, aren't you coming? And, is there even a spa that Mom can use comfortably? I have work, and this is the time to buckle down. It's a reward for you, Amy, for supporting Mom and our home. And staying bedridden at home is tough on her, right? I appreciate the thought, but don't worry about it. How about this place? It's fully accessible and very safe. So I think Mom will be comfortable there. Howard showed me a brochure for the spa. Upon checking, it indeed seemed like a place where my mother-in-law could enjoy without any hassle. You've really gone to the trouble of researching this. Thank you. It would be nice if you could come with us, so let's schedule it when you're available. Maybe next time. For now, just the two of you go. Okay, I'll take you up on your kind offer then. Thank you, Howard. So, I decided to go to the day spa with my mother-in-law as Howard suggested. As we discussed it in her room. Is it really okay for someone like me to go to a spa? Amy won't be able to relax with me around, and I might bother other guests. I initially didn't know how accessible and safe it was, so her concerns were understandable. But that worry was unnecessary. I showed my mother-in-law the brochure Howard had given me. Look at this. Howard prepared this brochure, and the place is well equipped for accessibility. They even have baths that you can enter in a wheelchair. Really? But you'll still have to help me with some things, won't it be hard? Please don't worry about that. I want to help you. And if needed, The staff at the spa will assist us. Are you sure? Of course. Let's go together. Amy says so too, Mom. Go and have a good time with peace of mind. Amy, Howard, thank you. All right, I'll take you up on your offer and go with Amy. With a smile, my mother-in-law agreed to go to the day spa with me. It had been a long time since I'd seen her smile like that. Was she ever able to smile since she became bedridden? I prepared for the day of the spa with anticipation. When the day arrived, then we're off. Thank you, Howard. Oh, enjoy yourselves. Okay. Howard saw us off. As we drove towards our destination, I suddenly realized something. Oh no, I've forgotten something. Mom, I'm sorry. Can we go back home once? Of course, it's fine. I told my mother-in-law, and we returned home to pick up the forgotten item. And I heard a noise upstairs. I wondered, what was that sound? Worried, I went upstairs and opened the door to the room from where the noise had come. What? Howard, what are you doing? And who is that person? Whoa, bad timing. Amy, why are you here? Weren't you at the spa? Wait. Howard, what are you going to do? As soon as I appeared, Howard and Susan were visibly shocked and flustered. From their appearance, I understood the cause of the noise I had heard earlier. Howard was having an affair with his coworker, Susan. What is this all about? Was the reason you've been coming home late? And suddenly sending me to the spa, all because of your affair with Susan? When I confronted him, Howard responded unbelievably. It's out now, so can't help it. Yes, I've been having an affair with Susan. Sorry, Miss Johnson. Well, you're Ms. Owen now, aren't you? What? What kind of attitude is that? As I trembled with rage, Howard's next words were also unbelievable. I guess there's no helping it now that the affair has come to light. For your sake, I'll divorce you. But you're going to have to take care of that bedridden old hag. What are you talking about? Isn't she your mom? What do I care? You were the one who said we'd live together so you could take care of the old hag. That's true, but you're being irresponsible. To think that he would disregard his own mother like this, on top of having an affair. What kind of person does he think he is? I was furious. Nevertheless, I managed to return to the car where my mother-in-law was waiting, and explained the situation. That's unforgivable. Amy, please take me to where Howard is. Oh, yes. After being asked, I took my mother-in-law to Howard. Howard, I did not raise you to be this way. What are you talking about? This is the reality of it. What? In that case, I disown you. Even in front of his mother, Howard remained defiant. Unable to tolerate his attitude, my mother-in-law made a clear declaration. Amy, I'm sorry. I never imagined things would come to this. You don't need to worry about me, just do what makes you happy. Despite being shocked by Howard's behavior, my mother-in-law still cared for me. Having always felt she was like a real mother to me, my conclusion was clear. Mom, please let me continue to help you. When I expressed this, my mother-in-law responded with a calm smile. Amy, thank you. Don't worry about the future. I have a plan. Really? Actually. I was surprised by her sudden declaration, but even more surprising words followed. Suggesting a way to get back at Howard. I don't know what you're talking about, but just keep struggling. Really, do your best. Unaware of what we were discussing, Howard and Susan left the house laughing together. They wouldn't be so relaxed if they knew what was coming. From then on, my mother-in-law and I started living together. After 7 years, she passed away due to complications from being bedridden. With no relatives, I handled her funeral. But Howard and his affair partner showed up laughing. So the old hag finally kicked the bucket, huh? Hey, she had a hefty inheritance, right? Must be about $3 million. I'll inherit it, so hand it over. After all the effort you put into taking care of her. It's pathetic that we end up taking the money. To think they had the nerve to show up. At that moment, I revealed what my mother-in-law had told me. Sorry, but you have no inheritance rights. What? What are you talking about? It's pathetic to make lame excuses. If you think so, you should check this. What I showed them was my mother-in-law's family register. No way, my name isn't there? Actually, Howard was the stepson of Howard's father. Howard's father and mother were not legally married, living in a kind of common law marriage. Coincidentally, both parents had the same last name Owen. So Howard assumed they were legally married and he was their legal son. However, that assumption was wrong. Howard and his mother were legally strangers. No way. This is bad, terrible. Howard, previously calm, now tore at his hair in panic. It seemed my mother-in-law's plan had worked as she had intended 7 years ago. However, she hadn't initially wanted to disinherit Howard if only he hadn't betrayed her. If he had lived honorably, he might have been entitled to inherit. Truly, he had only himself to blame. As I thought this, I turned to Susan, who had turned pale and spoke. What are we going to do now? How are we going to repay the money if we don't get the inheritance? Hey, don't say unnecessary things. Caught off guard, Susan blurted out something revealing. And Howard hurriedly tried to silence her. I thought, such an easy read. Their reaction made it clear they had been living extravagantly on borrowed money, hoping for an inheritance. There was one more thing I had to tell them. Also, I've consulted a lawyer, so I might be suing you for alimony. No, please, not alimony. Amy, I'm sorry. I apologize. Please, I'm reflecting on it. What are they saying after such betrayal? Asking not to pay alimony now is too much. That's impossible. I won't forgive you after such betrayal. And for hurting such a kind mother-in-law. I'm really sorry. Please, forgive us. As I spoke, the two of them fled the scene. Later, Howard failed to pay the alimony. Despite sending demand letters through lawyers and the courts, there was no effect. I wondered, what are they thinking? I decided to consult a lawyer again. The court has issued a seizure order, but it seems both of them have disappeared. The lawyer informed me. How can they just vanish like this? What are they really thinking? Their actions were utterly bewildering. Were they hiding to dodge paying alimony and their debts, or did they have another plan? Either way, escaping wouldn't be as easy as the two might think. I wondered about their workplace situation. Were they still showing up for work? Curious, I reached out to a former coworker and arranged to meet at a cafe near their company. It's been a while. Sorry for contacting you out of the blue. No problem at all. But what's the sudden concern? I've been wondering about Howard and Susan. Are they still showing up at work? As I asked, my coworker grimaced before responding. Those two have been fired for misconduct. What? The company obviously knew about your marriage to Howard. But then it came out that the two of them were having an affair. On top of that, They've been absent without notice lately, so it was inevitable. I see. I had suspected as much since they were now missing. Now, their whereabouts were unknown. It seemed unlikely that any good fortune would come their way in the future. Their end would likely be grim. What about you, Amy? What will you do now? Well, now that I'm free, maybe it's a good time to start working again. Why don't you come back to our company? You'd be a great asset, and everyone would welcome you. That's nice to hear. Maybe I will take you up on that offer. Returning to work at the company where Howard and Susan had been might feel awkward. But such worries seemed unnecessary. Feeling genuinely pleased by my coworker's invitation, I later contacted the company and returned to my job. Now, I'm working hard just like before. Though my marriage was unfortunate, I'm grateful to Howard for introducing me to such a kind and gentle mother-in-law. From now on, my career will be my partner. I'm looking forward to living a fulfilling life with this new purpose.